there's a lot of shame that can go with numbness, especially in a relationship as a man. Sometimes if you don't have the feeling, pressure's getting put on you. It's like, how do you feel? And sometimes we don't know.
I call it my genetic imprint. It's finding me. It's like a magical place to be. I'm touching on some edges in my life right now that I'm like, oh gosh, there's going to be some more ego death.
Our mind leads the way, and it's not where we're meant to be leading from. Our heart's meant to be leading the way. We are designed to live more in the mystery, more in the unknown, and to revel in the magic. Doing your shadow work and doing your inner work, turning up in that way, it's the grittiest path there is.
Yeah, you have to die over. I feel like there's so much death.
So much death.
Daniel, thank you for joining me and taking the time. I know this was a really random kind of request out of the blue.
It was. I was just saying before you hit the record button that it was perfect timing that you landed in my Insta messages on a video, which is always nice most of the time. But there was a familiarity with you that I thought, this chick's pretty vibey. This woman is vibey, and I like the word shebang.
Do you?
The vibe, yeah, the whole shebang. The whole shebang is like it sounds like more like an Aussie thing, but
does it?
Yeah, the whole shebang. It's probably known universally, but I found that pretty funny.
Oh, cool. Good. Well, I was kind of unsure about if I should name it that. And lately I've just been running this experiment in my life of literally just checking with my gut and seeing what feels good. And I'm like, yeah, that feels good. I'm going to just go with it. So I'm glad you liked it. All right, Daniel, I know you from reading your website and reading your Instagram, but of course I don't know you, and the listeners are going to get to know you. How would you introduce yourself?
How would I introduce myself? My name is Dan Regan. I'm a personal growth consultant and ambassador for the Gene Keys Wisdom. I've been running retreats in Mexico recently, so I'm actually now in Tulum, which is treating me well. And I'm passionate about the shadow work and bringing the unconscious conscious and exploring those realms. And that's been my journey for the last 15, 16 years, is going to the depths to find my own freedom and relief from and a bit of resolution from my own suffering, my own journey, my own early years. And that's turned into my life's work or my experience where I can facilitate others in understanding their shadow nature and understanding how to embody their gifts that they inherited in this lifetime coming through.
There's so much already, right there. I could ask a dozen questions. When I think about going into the shadow or think about going into the dark, or I imagine people that haven't been there, I imagine that there's some resistance to going into the dark or going into the shadow. Maybe not for everybody, because there's so much unknown. There's so much fear probably, and we're using the word dark, which if you haven't experienced it, can feel scary. But I like that you started out by saying you found your freedom there. Can you talk a little bit more about that? For the people that might be scared of this work, talk to me about the freedom and the dark.
Wow. Yeah. Okay. That really is where I found my freedom. Actually, I'd spent my earlier years and through my teens and my 20s where there was a lot of inner anguish. I would say there was a lot of internal suffering and turmoil, and I escaped a lot through alcohol and drugs and partying all through my teens and 20s. And then it came a time when I was 29 in my Saturn return that the wheels fell off, and they fell off worse than they'd fallen off, which I had some pretty spectacular fall-offs during my life. I made the decision to move to the west coast of Australia from the east coast because I didn't know anyone there. because I tried to move up and down the coast and change my ways over the years, and it just didn't work for me. And I went over to the West Coast, and I attended a workshop by a guy called Michael Rowland. He's passed now, but he was he had a whole Indian lineage. He used to follow the gurus and stuff like that. And I remember within 2 weeks of landing in Perth, I got a job over there. So I just moved everything there and started fresh and started cleaning my act up. And I started listening. I kept on hearing this ad on the radio, and this guy saying, "Do you ever wonder why your life is the way that it is?" And I was like, "Yeah." "Do you ever wonder why you can't change and you want?" And I was like, "Yeah." So I actually went to this seminar that this random guy from the radio, and I'd never been to anything personal development. I wasn't tapped. I didn't know of anything outside the dimension of I'm Dan, I'm this, and this is my physicality. I had no being of higher selves or spirit or anything like that. I was very in that realm. And one of the first things he did at this seminar, which I just felt so out of place at, was it was on this board, and he drew, the iceberg, and it's got the iceberg and out of the water. He said, "This is why you can't change." And that's the moment that clicked for me. I went, "Oh, that's why I can't change. It's this subconscious, unconscious business that's actually running the story of my whole life." And once I understood that, that's the moment that for me, it's like, oh, well, I got to get to the bottom of that. And what a mammoth task that is.
How do I get to the bottom of this?
And how do I get to the bottom of that? And that's been my journey, and it doesn't end. Yet that's where I found that all of the gold resides inside, but also in the places where we fear most. So wherever there's fear, that's where our task is to find and uproot that fear. So we're actually not running from the fear.
I've been using this phrase just like intuitively, like pain is the pathway, or this idea that like fear is the compass, and it's so counterintuitive. And maybe that's not even the right way of putting it. It actually feels intuitive when you start tuning into that, knowing that like, oh, okay, I've got to walk into this. And that experience of, I don't know, for me, it's been like a tunnel. It's like you go in and then it's so dark, and then you see this pinprick of light and you're like, oh, there's something on the other side of this. And I'm like describing it in kind of an ethereal way, but how would you describe that experience for you? Or like, how would you coach somebody that hasn't been there before? Like, what do they do on a practical level to start facing fear?
Yeah. And that's where it's interesting. And that's why I found the gene keys, which we'll talk about, GE keys, genetic keys. They're actually keys to unlock our genes and our genius. That's where I've found it's to be a priceless tool, because if anyone can go to genekeys.com, download their free profile, and basically that gives you a map of all of your shadows that you're here and incarnated in with and have to master. So they're all your themes, but they're all the shadow themes, but they're all the higher frequencies here too. Like they list the most enlightened state that we're here to bring to the earth, and all of our gifts that we're here to embody. But underneath everything is the shadow that requires us to know and own and alchemize in order to actually embody into those gifts. That's what these have been, one of the most predominant things in my journey that I've been journeying with for over a decade, that just there's no end, because the shadow has no end. It's quite amazing.
Little side note, and then I want to jump into the gene keys. I said a little bit of this before we hit the record button, but I was looking at your Instagram and it was talking about transmutation and alchemy and like fears and all this stuff. I was like, cool. Yeah. Like, yes, I'm all about all that. And then I dug deeper. I'm like, oh, he's into gene keys. I had sort of forgot. Now I'm blanking on his name. The gene keys, like The guy that wrote the book. Yeah, Richard.
Yeah.
So I bought had the Venus sequence and the other one, just like the classes to take through. And so I did a bunch of work with the gene keys last fall.
Great.
Yeah. And so it was like, so I stayed up late last night, like reviewing all the notes that I had taken on my own gene keys. I was like, what are my shadows again? Oh yeah. But funny enough, like, I had set it aside because I go through these cycles of learning where I'm like saturated, and then I'm like, this is all I can get right now. And then I just need to walk it out. So I sat it aside. And then when I came back to it last night, I was like, oh my gosh, all of the things that have sort of come to fruition in my life, or the people I've stumbled into, or these different things, I'm like, it's all here. Like, it's all validating my experience, and my experience is validating that. And it's pretty wild.
Wild. It's so wild that even after all this time, in the early days, this is 2013, 14, I was, explaining to everyone what the gene keys were, because they're like, oh, what are the gene keys? And it's like, so I've explained this so many times. And now it's rare that I have to explain it because people know about it already, and it's great. But then when I do explain it, sometimes I actually wow myself at it's like not at what I'm saying, but it's like, oh my God, there's this technology on the planet right now to assist us to evolve and master the vehicles that we came here and inherited as we came in. And they've literally list every single theme that you're here to play out this lifetime, and the frequency bands and the streams of consciousness that are designed to run through your reality. It's all in this system. It's all in this template. And when I work with people, it's like, because basically the gene keys are a wound map. They're not advertised as that, but that's what they are in essence. You go through the activation sequence and bring it alive, and then you go into the Venus sequence, and the Venus sequence is basically the imprinting from the 9 months gestation period in the womb, the first, second, and third 7-year cycles, so physically, emotionally, and mentally, and what archetypes and themes govern those years, and what the precise defense mechanisms emotionally and mentally that we actually used in that time that are now our unconscious defense mechanisms. It's all in this map, and it's profound. It's like, oh my God, there's actually a map that actually can take us back into ourselves, but into the places of contraction where we learned to close our heart, and what life actually catalyzed in us in order to awaken us in that sense.
Okay, will you do us all a favor and wow us? Like, just pull back a little bit on the gene keys and explain for somebody who hasn't heard what it is. I'm prepared to be wowed. I'm ready.
So that was my 5 planets in Scorpio coming through there. But so the gene keys are there's so many different ways to explain this. The gene keys are a stream of consciousness that is with us now and available to all who penetrate the transmission. And in transmission, I'm talking about, it's like an energy transmission that once penetrated, you start to live within a stream. And it's a stream of consciousness that will drop in insights and bring in from the periphery of your awareness and up from the depths the information that we require to move through our lives with more precision. And so there's 64 gene keys based on the 64 hexagrams of the I Ching. Are you familiar with the I Ching?
A little bit, yeah.
So this was the book of changes that the Masters of Old used to rule the lands. It's like an oracle, and so the 64 hexagrams were born from that, and the 64 hexagrams of the I Ching, they actually mirror the 64 codons in our DNA. So it's a reprogramming language for our genetic code. Every gene key has a shadow frequency, a gift frequency, and a acidic frequency, which is SIDDHIC. That's our most enlightened state. They have a gift frequency that we're here to embody, and if there's a gift on your hologenetic profile, you'll see there's 3 words, and they go in that order: shadow gift city on people's chart when they download it, and quickly pause and download it now, and then you'll know what I'm talking about.
I have. Oh, you're telling your people. I'm like, I have mine.
I'm telling the listeners.
Yes, they should pause it, go download it. Yes,
download it, and then you'll see that there's 3 frequency bands, and they're basically the themes that you're here to play out this lifetime, from the bottom to the top. And then they've also got these line frequencies. So there's a number. There'll be a number from 1 to 64, and then there'll be a dot and a number from 1 to 6, and they represent the 6 lines of the hexagrams. And so there's different frequency bands running through those lines, which give the key a flavor. But there's a whole world in those lines that is as profound as the keys are sometimes. So when people's awareness start to look at that map and say, oh wow, okay, this is some themes will be familiar. Some will probably make you cringe, and some will make you have an inner contraction, because they're basically the challenging themes that you're here to investigate and to alchemize, so you can embody your greatest self in this life. There's a couple of spins.
That's great. I've been using the word alchemize a lot lately because it resonates with the experience that I'm feeling. Can you talk about alchemy? Like, what does it really mean? Do you know how it works? What's the experience like? Is that question making sense?
Yeah. What does it mean for you, may I ask?
Yeah. Oh gosh. Are you ready for this? I mean, I'm just gonna go here.
Yeah.
So this is just like a tangential story, and then I'll bring it back to the point. We're gonna go on a little journey.
Very good.
My latest fascination, which I'm like, where is this coming from, is Mary Magdalene.
Okay.
And so I actually have the book sitting right here, this book, and have never had this.
Which book, out of interest?
I've got several books. So I have Mary Magdalene Revealed. I have Magdalene Mysteries. They're all over the place. I have The Third Jesus by Deepak Chopra.
Okay. You've gone Magdalene nuts. Sweet. Okay. Carry on.
I kind of do that. I kind of deep dive on a thing, and I'm like, it's all I want to do right now is do the podcast and learn about Mary Magdalene. It's just this weirdest. Feels really weird, right? But
yeah.
So I got the book because I'm getting all these little cues to just like pull on the thread, right? Mm-hmm. And I open up the book and I just start reading the front, just like the chapter, the index. And I really don't have a concept, or didn't at the time, of like who she is. But upon like just reading the chapters, I'm all of a sudden feeling waves of grief. And I've never had that experience in my life. And I have no logical understanding of what's really happening, but I'm feeling grief in this moment. It was about 4 hours one day come up. And as it hits like my heart, my center area, I guess like transform, like love. So it's like grief and then love outpouring, and just this waves of this. Then I'd be like in the car driving, like, okay, I'm good. I think this is past. And then just another, like, oh, I can't be in public. You know, I'm like, what is this going to ever end? But to me there's some anger in there too, or some like rage that I feel like I'm like, where is this coming from? Is this ancestral? Like what? I don't have an understanding of it, but it's like, I'm feeling it coming up, sort of changing, and then coming out as like light.
Yeah, that's alchemy at its best.
Oh, is that what that is? Okay, so I've been using that word because I'm like, it's the only word that makes sense for what feels like is happening.
Yeah, and that's so good. That what you're doing there is that's like a superpower.
What?
Because what you're doing there is that's alchemizing through your body and through your heart. Yet, that's where the mind can get involved and distract us away from the actual feeling. Because a lot of times people, if they're in a similar situation, it's like, oh, why is this happening? And they want the why, but the mind is looking for the why. And a lot of the times the mind is looking for the whys because as a distraction away from the feeling. Because in the late teenage years, that's third 7-year cycle, the mind actually forms its mental defense strategies in a way, and the busier it gets a lot of the time, the less chance we have of feeling the actual feelings. Because as you touched on very correctly, it's like a lot of the times we don't know, and we don't need to know. We don't need to make a story out of what's happening, because a lot of the time, and the deeper we go and the more shadow content we own for ourselves, we're tapping into the ancestral, we're tapping into the collective, and that doesn't have a story. It's too complex. It's none of our business in a way. Our job is to feel. Our job is to feel and own and account for our slice of the suffering that we all inherit when we come in our own different ways. And as we do that, that's when we start to alchemize at a far greater level, because it's letting the body do its thing. And like you touched on at the start of the call, people fear the dark, they fear death. We've got all these fears underneath, and we're literally built as human beings to move away from anything uncomfortable. So it's tricky to actually even stay with the feeling, or even get through the layers of numbness that are between us and the actual feeling, because we live in a society that is numb. Like numbness it's like an epidemic, but it's numbness. So it's not often, it's not like anger or sadness or grief. Numbness is just numbness. It's like there's a blanket of numbness. And to get through, that's why I say that what you're doing is a superpower, because a lot of people, including myself, don't really have the capabilities to fully go into that. I've obviously journeyed into those spaces, but it's not on tap like it is how I perceive it to be more in women, in that feminine flow, in the emotion. When you're riding the emotional waters deeper, we're kind of just built different.
I think, well, that's part of what this whole Mary Magdalene thing is this, like, the divine feminine is embodied, it's connected to the body. So I've been approaching it logically over the last several years, and just the more that I'm becoming more conscious, the more that I'm just like, is this my life's theme? Like, it's all in the body. It just feels like, now it feels like, quote unquote, common sense to me. And the more I open and release constriction, the more I can just feel without judgment. And I wouldn't have known this, except I was looking at my gene keys last night, and I can't remember what number it is. But one of the shadows is the one where you're thinking too much, like you're in your mind.
Definitely.
I don't remember what it is. And then the gift, I think, is intuition. Are those two connected?
Unease and intuition.
Yeah, I think so. Yeah.
Meditation. Yeah.
But it felt validating to go, because I'm also working through that outside, like, you're too sensitive, you're crazy, you're overly emotional. That outside that can keep you numb or keep you in your head. And instead of going, but my intuition is telling me to just let this roll, like to let this move through. But coming back to what you said about people being numb, how can we resensitize? How do you resensitize or like reduce numbness in life?
First of all, realizing it's there and naming it. And actually admitting it is the thing. Even as a man, in my journey, numbness has been a huge part of the deconstruction and growth journey that I've been on. It's taken years to get through the layers of numbness, because I had just packed it on from such an early age, and part of that is, there's a lot of shame that can go with numbness as well, especially in relationship. As a man, in relationship, sometimes if you don't have the feeling, like if pressure is getting put on you, it's like, well, how do you feel? And sometimes we don't know, or sometimes we don't don't have access to it under the numbness, or sometimes it's so far down and in that we can't give can't give as men an answer like that, and it puts us under pressure. But if we don't know, that can activate the shame as well in there. That it's like, oh, I'm meant to be feeling something, and she's putting me on the spot, or he's putting me on the spot, and it can start to, and what that will do is just drag us back up into the mind, and we'll give an intellectual answer instead of what's actually happening, because we don't know yet a lot of the time. Or
this is so insightful.
or it's going to be a little while before we can actually feel into what we're actually feeling. And sometimes there won't be a feeling, but being put on the spot sometimes for men is really tricky, because that's where the intellect will just go, oh, I need an answer, and then we'll answer from the mind, but it's not an embodied answer.
In relationship, how could a woman approach that in a more effective way?
Just leave us alone. No.
But I'm a goddess. I'm called to call you.
No, that was a joke for anyone who is overly sensitive to these sorts of things. To know that, and just to understand that, and depending on your partner, like you might have a very emotionally intelligent male sitting in front of you that still doesn't have the answers like you would have the answers. Yet giving the time and space and realizing that we're all just built so remarkably different, but putting any sort of pressure or getting frustrated that we can't give you the answers sometimes that you're looking for, that you get from maybe your friends or something like that. There's more acceptance on both ends, because the more that you give men an opportunity to have the space to express when we want to express, instead of putting pressure on, because that pressure can trigger those things, and there can be shame underneath that. I lived a lot of years of that, actually. Like, I'd go to different therapists or body workers and say, oh, I'm feeling a lot. They'd say, it's like, I'm feeling a lot of anger. It's like, cool. I've got nothing in me is angry right now, but you might be picking up on it. But do you know how frustrating that is for to be told that? And what are you going to do about it? It's like, oh, okay, cool. I don't have access to it because it's underneath all these layers, and sometimes it just needs to be accessed. It needs to be accessed through gentleness, through softness, which can be a very foreign thing for men, especially in the conditioned society that we grow up in. One of the techniques, if you're after a technique, is to touch. Loving touch is also good. But for anyone who, it's like, put your hand on your heart, and do you feel anything there? Like, and a lot of the time it can be no. But then, okay, can you get a heartbeat? Okay, can you? So it's like just sticking to the meditation or an inquiry point of putting your hands on your heart and tuning in and seeing what feelings are there, because a lot of the time there can be no feelings there at all, and even coming into deeper acceptance of that. But when there's a denial of it, or there's just a distraction and we just keep on moving through the world and distract ourselves and keep on numbing out through the external, we don't get to unpack those layers. We don't get to really deepen into ourselves and our inner beings, where all of that is.
Do you feel like that? Some of my experience has been that, like, just creating space for stillness and quiet, it doesn't always unearth things, but part of the numbness is the hurried, like, constant movement. Like, we're going to keep moving, but as we, like, slow, it at least creates space for feeling, or for, I'm using the word sensual, like 5 senses. So that's a practice that I'll do, is just like, what do I feel? What do I hear? What do I smell? And that's helped sort of get me out of my head and get back into just actual tactile feeling. Do you find that to be true as a man, that as you create space, things will show up, sort of?
Things will always show up, no matter what vehicle that we inhabit, but that's where the scary point is, because that's where the unknown comes from. And as humans, we fear the unknown, and we fear what may be down underneath. even unconsciously. So so humanity as a as the collective, how we're just conditioned, and where life is going at this pace, and to go against the grain of humanity and the collective field right now it can be really intense. But stopping can be I've got a practice at the moment because like 12 times a day I stop for 3 minutes. And I've got a little checklist on my phone. It's like, okay, I'll do one, and I'll just stop, and I'll put the alarm on for 3 minutes and just stop everything. Put my phone down, no matter how busy I am, and that can be the most challenging thing, because it's like, oh, I'll just do it after this email, and then I'll go to this, and then this, and then if I don't do that, I don't stop all day. And I've got a motor, so I can just burn all my energy, and by the time the day's done, I just haven't had any time. But I call them enforced pauses that they make me stop. And when I stop, I can start yawning. You can just have, but the mind might be going the whole time sometimes. But then as I practice more of these pauses, space starts to open up. And then the feelings that we've denied for so long can actually start coming to the surface. And that's where the beauty is. That's where the insights will come from. That's not from the external. Like that's when we start tapping into our inner being in a deeper way. And I'm only going through that 3 times a day thing right now because I've had a lot of organizing, and it keeps me entrained. Yet I do like to move through the world at a slower pace, in which I don't get distracted more often, because we're just so distracted. The Taoists call the 5 senses the 5 thieves, because they take us out of ourselves. And we're living in a society where we're externally fixated, and we're addicted to screens, and we're addicted to so many different things, and they limit the way that we can access our inner worlds. They take us away from that. They pull us, they hook our attention, and they take us out. So it's really important to, set the boundaries on screens and, everywhere that we're externally fixated, in order to start this inner cultivation process and become more internally grounded, because that's the only way that we're going to find relief from our suffering and everything that we're going from in our lives.
You've mentioned the collective a few times. Talk to me about the collective and what you sense and see happening right now.
A lot of chaos, a lot of upheaval, a lot of cracks starting to appear in the systems and structures that have always held power in that way. And, we're going through this great change at the moment. We're in a birthing portal of something completely new, but we don't know what that is yet. Like we don't know how that looks, and we might get glimpses or hope for a better world or a fairer world and things like this. Yet, in truth, I don't think anyone really knows what that looks like. Yet we're in that stage where we're in so much change, and people are going through so much on so many different levels that I've really been wondering lately, like, how are some people actually getting through this?
What do you mean?
I've actually been personally, I've been contemplating and being with that inner giving up, this subtle texture of giving up. And it comes to me sometimes because it's like I'll go from being super inspired and full of energy and on my path and focused, and everything's happening. And then in some moment, generally when I'm having, when I'm not at a fast pace and not running at that, humming at that pace, there's this texture of giving up. There's this point. It's like, just like, what's the point? And for me, I was actually writing about this morning, actually. So this is fresh, and forgive me if it comes out.
That's great.
Because I had a lot of years early on where suicide was a realistic avenue for me, and it was like this giving up because I didn't have any other answers or places to go. And I do feel there's a texture of that comes back in to my life now. It's like what I call the remnants of that program that I ran for so long, was the thing of giving up. And where I'd never follow through with it these days, the tendency to have followed through back then was a very real thing. It was only a thought form away from actually happening. Yet now, with what I've cultivated for myself and the journey that I've had, I can actually witness that within myself and go, and it's like welcoming home an old friend who's just, and I can watch it and I can accept it without denying it. And that's where I think that, like, if people are going through a similar thing, whether this is giving up, it's not to deny it, but allow it actual space and to investigate or inquire into that. Like, where is it? Like, where does that sit in your body, or where did that actually first happen in this life? So there's that piece personally. Yet I do feel that there's a part, because we're all a part of this collective energy that is on the planet. Like, we're all one at the biggest level, yet we're all swimming in these pools of frequency. And so this has got to be happening to, like, if it's happening to me, it's got to be happening in other people. If it's happening in you, it's got to be happening in other people as well, because we're swimming in pools of frequency. So it's kind of like a phenomenon that I've been, just watching with myself. This has been for the last few months, but if I mention it to someone, because I like to talk about these things because they really interest me. And then there'll be some kind of, when I've brought it up in conversation, it's like, like the person who go, it's like, I'm
not alone. Yeah.
but I like to talk about these things and normalize talking about them, and normalize talking about our wounds and wound work and shadows, everything like that. Because the more we talk about it, it's been repressed and suppressed and denied for so long. Yet we live in a day and age now that we've got so much access to what's ours to own, that and life is like cheering us on to go to these depths, to find the gold that resides within, in order to live our most wholesome and lives that we can actually live.
So you said there's this thread or this like underlying feeling of giving up, and I'm just like connecting or wanting to connect the dots in my mind that giving up, what's the use? Like, to me implies that there's a hope for something that you're wondering if, like, we're going to get there. Like, what's the use? I'm hoping for, or I'm expanding towards this, and there's doubt that that thing is going to happen. Is that accurate?
Yeah, I guess say it another. Can you say that another way?
Like, if I was like, I'm really hoping, like, I'm going to run a marathon, and I'm like, I'm going to do this thing. I'm going to go. Like, I can see the end in sight. I've got this vision in my mind. I've got this idea of what's possible. I got this idea of where I'm headed, but I'm on mile 19 and I'm like, I want to give up. Like, what's the use? I'm not going to get there. I'm not going to make it. Like, I want to give up. So to me, the thought or the feeling of giving up also, like, inherently implies that there's something that you can see that you doubt if you can receive or get to, or something. I don't know if that's, I'm curious, like, what the hope is that you see that you're discouraged that you're not seeing. Does that make sense?
Yeah. I guess the more that I reside in the unknown, there's less things to cling on to. There's less external stability. I travel a lot, so I travel the world and run events and do my work online. So I don't have I've got a couple of bases, but I don't have that solid certainty in a way. And I think when you don't have that amount of solidity, sometimes for me would intensify some of the feeling that I get when I'm going through big processes, or I'm integrating a lot of what I've been journeying through. That's more when that feeling can arise, because I've been pushing for so long and been going so deep for so long that there's a fragility or a tenderness under there that exposes itself, rather than giving up on a goal, because I don't necessarily live a goal-orientated existence at all. I live through intentionality, but long-term doesn't work for me in a way.
That can't be easy. I don't want to like put that on you, but I'm like, we live in a society that is so goal-oriented.
Yeah. And for me, and I believe a lot of people who have different parts of their template designed in this way, it's not to. We place all our bets on the future, the expectations of the mind. The mind is always looking for stability in the future. And I guess the clarity for me that's coming through this conversation is, the more I go against that and the more I deconstruct my inner world and reside in that unknown, that's going against the grain. That's for me, such a radical level consistently as a practice to not know. And that's where I find these polarities that are in the darkness, that are shrouded in other things. They can be shrouded in activity or distraction or anything like that. Yet when in the more subtle levels of consciousness, it's like everything can reveal itself, but you're not attaching to it like you probably would if you were more in the mind, or you hadn't cultivated your inner world, so to speak. Does that make sense?
It does. Yeah. Yeah. I'm like thinking of who might be listening to this and what they're thinking. And so just forgive me if these questions sound kind of like like abrasive, but I'm like, so if you're not living by goal, if you don't have an out there intention that your mind is attached to,
it's confronting.
Okay.
That's confronting, because if we have, it's like, yeah, we're going to get this. Goals are great.
Yeah.
And I'm not, if you're a goal orientated person and you get out there getting your goals and you're being successful, that's great. It's just simply not my way. And I find that because, and I always used to get that, I really gave myself permission to live this way, because a lot of the time early on, it's like, oh, what do you want to be in 5 years? And that question to me is like ridiculous. It's like
nails on a chalkboard.
It's like, but I could never come up with anything. Oh, okay. I want lots of money, and you can throw these things out there. Yet, are they really what existence and our greatest divine will is dictating in our lives? So for me, it's a path of surrender, because life knows what's best. We're just the last people to know what that is. And that's the most gritty place I've found to live, because it's surrendered. It's like, okay, my will is thy will. Show me what the next step is. You're not going to get the long-term plan. You could, and again, this isn't going against people who have got, they've got the vision and they're working towards the vision. Go for gold. For me, in my life, it is to completely let go of control of my life, and allow life to move through me and guide me where it wants me to be, because it's got more of an idea than me. Always. There's an intelligence that is so far outside the pay grade of our awareness that is running the show. And if we're surrendered to that, they can move us around in a very easy way. Yet if we're too busy with our lives, or busy or distracting ourselves, or willing life to go this way, and existence wants us over there, it's going to move us. And it's going to move us in a really harsh way. It's got its way to move.
It's going to move one way or another.
You're not going to win that battle. You can resist it, And you can resist it and keep resisting it your whole life. You're not going to live an easy life. You're going to live a life that's going. You're not in the sweet spot. You're not in the sweet spot of synchronicity and the magic and the flow, because the magic is in the unknown. Yet the large portion of humanity and humans don't live in the magic because we're petrified of the unknown. Because what's in the unknown? All of our fears and all of the things that we don't want to look at. That's what's in the unknown. But when we start to revel in the unknown, every day is a mystery, and it's magic, and there's synchronicity, and the right people show up at the right time, and all of these things start to happen because we let go of the reins. And letting go of control has been a large part of my journey. I know what it's like to control my reality. I know what it's like to mentally control my reality. I know what it's like to control people around me, situations, so I feel more safe. And that's been one of the biggest deconstructions that I've had is that control programming that I inherited, largely from ancestral, but also collective. We like to control our reality. Yeah, that's a program that can be deconstructed.
Well, and you said it, that we resist it. And to me, resistance is tension, and tension is constriction, and all of that causes pain. Just you think of it on like a very basic level. It's like, okay, I have tension. I'm going to lift weights. That's maybe a different kind because it causes growth. And I suppose this path causes growth too. Like that resistance is still going to cause growth if you want to get deep on it. But
100%.
So I'm living in constant tension because I'm trying to control, for people that are living that life, wanting to control. And I've been there. I'm still there at times, of course, where that I really am working on in these little ways, like inviting you to be on the pod. Like I'm really working on the small moments every day, surrendering to the small moments and living in flow. And it isn't easy when you can only, at least for me, I'm curious for you. I'm like, I don't know where people are like, what are you going to do with the podcast? I'm like, I don't know. I don't have an end goal in mind. I just know that I'm loving doing this and this is really in flow right now. So I'm going to do this. And it's uncomfortable to answer that question sometimes too, without the end in mind, when all I can see is like a step or two ahead of me. Is that your experience, that you get like just a little bit ahead of you and then that's it?
Yeah, it is. And you touched on some really good points this whole episode. Yet it's like, the I don't know. There's shame in the I don't know. It's like if we don't know what's going on, and my family's used to this now because they've had enough years of me. It's like, where are you going next? It's like, I don't know yet. But there used to be, if because projections can come from that. It's like, well, why don't you know? And you should know. But but it's the opposite. We shouldn't know so much. Like giving up our knowing is the whole trip. But there can be shame that arises when we don't know, and we don't have this certainty, and we don't know, like we don't have this solidity around us, or where we're going, or what path we're actually walking. So it's an interesting thing. It's an interesting phenomenon that we live in a world that needs to know, and through that knowing, this leads the way. Our mind leads the way, and it's not where we're meant to be leading from. Our hearts are leading the way. We are designed to live more in the mystery, more in the unknown, and to revel in the magic. And going back to that resistance piece, it's an interesting line because a lot of the time we're just doing our thing. That might be going over here, and life is kind of nudging us back over here. The only true way I've found to find our greatest grooves and trajectories is to know our own shadow content, because our own shadow, our shadow content is the thing that's driving and pulling the strings from underneath the surface of our lives. And if we don't understand what our shadows are, and we've done no inner cultivation work around them, that chances are that we'll be running from those shadows. And we'll be avoiding those shadows because we're built as human beings to avoid them. Yet it's a fine line sometimes too, even, when you said about lifting weights. It's interesting because life does want us to go through and have this resistance, this tensionality that is built into life, and it's built into growth. I'm not saying the easy path is like just one where we're dancing along and everything's sweet all the time, because we're still going to go through the depths in that way, but the rewards are much greater because we're in divine alignment.
Mm-hmm. I'm having this experience now, excuse me, in life where I'm coming up against some resistance, or I'm sensing it with the things I'm doing or the interests that I have. And one of the sort of blessings in that to me is that I also can see the inner strength in a different way than if I didn't have resistance to push against, if that makes sense.
Mm-hmm.
Or like it shows up and then it shows me where my strength is, or where my knowing is, where my surrender is, where my confidence is. It gives me a different reflection. Mm-hmm. Does that make sense?
Yeah, 100%.
Yeah.
Right.
Okay, one thing you've touched on that I'd love to chat about is, I don't know if you said these words, I'm sure I read them on your website, but you've referenced this idea of surrender, or surrender to existence, and the idea of co-creation. Like, if we're going to co-create a life with the universe, do you say God? Do you say God?
Yeah.
Existence, or like, what do you believe in? Maybe let's start there.
God.
Yeah.
I think
God, goddess.
Yeah. I'm not. I can run with that.
This universe. Yeah. Okay, so
existence, God.
Yeah. Do we get a say in what this life looks like?
In the little thing, my answer personally would be in the little things, yes. In the big picture, no. Yet that's where the beauty is. What would you say to that question that you asked me?
Just turning the tables. I like this.
Yeah.
I like the word co-creation because I feel like it's a dance. I feel this is just my experience of life. I think that I can't deny that I'm wired a certain way, that there are certain giftings, and that the universe is bringing me all these synchronicities to show me that through the gene keys, through human design, through these random books, through random conversations, that it's like, oh, you're here, like you chose to come here for a reason at this time with those parents for a specific purpose that is an orchestration with something that is so divine and so much bigger than you can comprehend. Mm-hmm. And to think that I'm like a puppet on strings feels like the worst thing ever. It's like, what, are you just forcing me to do? Like, I'm not being forced, right? Like, and I grew up in a religious environment that I'm sure that I've got some wounding there and triggers there that I resist that idea a little bit, except that I'm also not. Like, I'm super in surrender, I think, as much as I can see myself objectively. Like, I'm in flow, but I also resist this idea that I don't have choice. Because do you know?
Oh, 100%. It's such a good conversation because it's it's multi-layered, this conversation. Mm-hmm. And I love it because it just brings up, okay, how much free will choice have we got? And mm-hmm. I do believe that we do get a say in some things. We get to eat what we want, we get to do what we want, to some mm-hmm. degree. In my experience, the bigger things, the big karmic contracts and relationships that are going to come into our lives, everything like that, is like, we don't get a say. And they're the main ones that are going to come in to trigger our deepest things. So we evolve through those things if we're surrendered, if we choose to walk this path of mm-hmm. personal growth and development. And it doesn't have to be all about growth, development, everything like that. Yet, there are still rules that are built into life,
like laws of nature. Laws, yeah.
Yeah. There's natural law that governs this reality, and it's so much greater than our little personal decisions and what we think we want a lot of the time.
Mm-hmm.
And then someone listening to this might go, oh, that's, who are really fixated on knowing or goals or thinking that they have full free will and control over everything in their reality. This might be a bit of a triggering conversation to listen to. And I'm not saying I'm right. We're not here saying that we're right. I'm simply telling my experience from my experience.
Yeah.
And it's not making anyone else wrong either. This is just what I've kind of discovered about existence through really deep humblings by life. Thinking I'm going a certain way, or thinking I know, or thinking I've got this, it's going to be my trajectory, and all of a sudden existence goes bang,
wow.
And then I go through a complete shattering, and then I'm out the end of that shattering and humbled, and like life wasn't as it was 3 days ago. And that's why like living in the mystery and going with the flow might sound nice and easy, yet in my experience, if you're doing your shadow work and doing your inner work and turning up in that way, it's the grittiest path there is. Yeah, it's the
you
one
have to die like over. I feel like there's so much death.
So much death. There's so much death, and there's so much humbling. There's so much.
Yeah.
Because it's like here's another spin. It's like, we're like divine beings, yet that light can't express itself through these dense layers that we've inherited, both from our incarnation, our ancestral wounding, everything like that. We're all carrying it, and it can't express itself through. So our job, if we choose it, and if we're on this path of personal growth and development, is to continue to surrender and to go through these death and rebirth situations and the shatterings and the humblings, because they're the only things that, if you go through a good humbling or a good shattering, it's a chance for such a profound recalibration and a setting of your energy at a profound level. And that's why shatterings and humblings, they're a gift. They don't feel like a gift when you're in them. They feel like the worst thing on earth they can. Yet the realignment that happens after that energetically, because you don't have some of the layers or some of the edges in which you did have before the shattering, they're not there anymore. And that's why life can then go, oh yeah, the way is here. Okay, I'm going to go over here now because I don't have these.
Right. Well, all that resistance, it's all that resistance that you're living in. If you decide to let go to that and go through the shattering and let the ego die a bit. Yeah, that's been my experience too. Then I come out on the other side and go, oh, it's so much lighter physically in a bright way. Like everything feels more aligned.
Yeah.
And I think that's like kind of coming back to this free will thing. My experience, just like I'm looking back at my life and I'm like, oh my gosh, if I can now, because now I've lived enough life, 42. So now I'm like, oh, I can see how these pieces that I could not see how they connected, even in just the last month, I'm seeing how things are coming together. And I'm like, my calling is my calling. I'm putting, I don't know what to call it, but like my calling, my design, my genetic imprint, whatever, it's finding me. Like it is I'm not finding it. I guess maybe I am, but I feel like it's finding me. I feel like if I'm open, it's showing up. And that is a wild, like you said, it's like a magical place to be, but I'm touching on some edges in my life right now that I'm like, oh gosh, there's going to be some more ego death that's going to have to happen because people are going to think this is wild.
Yeah, 100%. It's like what you're touching on there is the fact that we live in an inverted reality where the things that we think are one way, they're completely the opposite. It's like a glove. It's like a washing up glove. It's like you think reality is like this and you take the glove off and it's the exact opposite of what we think it was. And that's the conditioning and that's the illusion that we live in. That's the Maya that we live in. And breaking out of that is a fascinating process. It's profound because we live in this illusory reality that is it's a trip.
It is a trip. We're here for a trip.
It's a trip.
Yeah.
It's like do you have the 31st gene key at all? Do you
Let me just pull mine up real quick.
Yeah, pull yours up real quick.
Okay, hold on.
I'm fascinated what yours are actually.
You're what? Curious?
I'm curious as to what you're packing there, Jennifer.
Okay.
Hold on. Let's see here. Wait, which one do you want to know? Just any of them? If I have number what?
Just if do you have the 31 at all?
Yes, I do.
Where does it sit? What sphere?
In my Venus, how can I tell? It's attraction, right up from purpose.
Oh, okay. You've got it in your attractor field, yeah?
What does that mean?
That you got to love a humbling.
That's in my path. Humbling is in my path.
Yeah, well, the thing that I just felt to bring this up, and there you go. But it's the 31. So this will give. May I talk into this 31st?
Yes, please. I welcome it.
Okay. So as an example, the 31st gene key has the shadow of arrogance, which some of these shadow names we don't really want to own fully. There you go.
What is that? What was that? I don't know what that was. Okay, anyways.
We're going to explain. No, we won't explain. The butt balloon appeared on my screen. There's a setting on my computer that does these. Like if I do a thumbs up, it'll do. It normally happens on Zoom, but I've never seen it happen on Riverside. But there you go.
Balloon. It was new to me. I was thinking something divine was happening.
Well, it is. That's a download. So the gene key is the 31st, and it's got the shadow of arrogance, gift of leadership, and the city of humility. So the highest frequency of this genetic archetype is that of humility. That's the enlightened state. But the shadow of arrogance is a tricky one because we're blind to our own arrogance by design. And we're blind to our own arrogance because our ego won't let us see it. So the only way that we can actually see our own arrogance is through humbling.
Goody gumdrops.
Yeah. So good luck with that. But there's a beauty in it, though. I joke when I say that. Good luck with that.
I know.
Yeah. There's a beauty in that, though, because if you can accept a humbling fully and completely, and you can accept that humiliation that comes with a humbling at times, because a lot of the times we will get humbled in front of people that we love and care about most and actually care what they think of us most. And so humblings can be very intense, yet they can be a really beautiful shattering process for a program or a pattern that we weren't aware of before the humbling occurred. And if during that humbling process, we can own and account for everything that's ours to own. It's like, oh, yeah, that was a dick move there. I said the wrong thing there. I was mean there. I projected my stuff there. Whatever it is that then led to the humbling. If we can put our hand up and say, you know what, I did this, I'm really sorry, apologize if necessary to the other people or the person involved, and say, yeah, look, I'm owning it all. That's where we get the biggest alchemy from our humblings. Yet if there's a denial or we try and or if we're dishonest about the humbling, or we try and get out of it to save face, or our ego then clicks back in to then, we're kind of rebuilding a pattern that just got deconstructed and blown apart. The ego can start to build it back up if we're not onto, okay, this is a humbling. This is maybe a bit of an initiation process for me. How can I turn up the best within it? And how can I show up for myself and for the other people involved and own everything that I can within it? And then we get the gold out of the humbling. So humblings are actually they're a great gift there's a bit of an art form in the ownership of them, though. But that's what that 31 is all around about. So everyone with that 31 has leadership, which is the gift. So all leadership potential in this context is underlined by arrogance. So leaders are here to be humbled over and over and over again until they're leaders of humility, like true humility. And true humility, it's not like this false humility. It's like an embodied humility, and it doesn't care if other people think that you're humble. It doesn't. It's beyond that.
Yeah.
So, false humility that comes, oh, be humble, it's this and that. It's like, nah, that's all superficial BS. But it's a beautiful key, that 31. And so just when you started talking, when we touched on humblings, but you were talking about something else, and I got a bit curious as to...
I don't remember what I was talking... Oh, that I'm coming up against some edges right now that... that I feel like are gonna just continue to break my ego, you know? Yeah. And my purpose is 8. So I was reflecting on that last night too, just because I feel like a lot of this is just like, I need to just really be me. Who am I? And can I be that no matter what anybody thinks? And that's not, I feel like I've arrived, and then I'm like, oh no, like there's another thing, like, oh, you serious? I'm going to have to talk about Mary Magdalene, and all my old church friends are going to think I'm a, prostitute or something. Just coming up against these weird, I'm like, oh, I guess there's still more there, and I think I don't care what people think. And then there's a little corner there that's like, okay, all right.
It's so good that you touched on that, caring what people think. But as a reflection, I've known you for the best part of 3 days, and the way that you embody this gift of style is great. Like, you embody the gift of style.
Do I? Thank you.
Oh, 100%. Because that 8th key is 8 and it's compromise and mediocrity, the 2 shadows, the 8 and the 14, they're programming partners.
Yep.
So, but you to be so, what I perceive to be so fully self-expressed and willing to be transparent and willing to have your own style, which was the first thing that struck me about you. It's like, oh wow, who's this? She's not holding back, and you really exhibit that gift of your own style, because you aren't here to walk the path like other people. You can do similar things, but your trajectory, like everyone's trajectory, yours is we've got our own sweet spot, and that's not like anyone else's sweet spot. So you embody that gift really well. Thank
you. I received that. Yeah. Yeah, it's been a journey. What's the word that we said? A ride. You just said ride. Trip. It's been a trip.
And for me, in my experience as well, caring what other people think has been one of the biggest learning deconstructions. Get to the bottom of that. It just kept on. It's probably one of the biggest themes that I've worked through in my personal development, is to not care what anyone else thinks, no matter, and just to stand in my truth. And it's like, okay, and I'm a lot better than I used to be, but I still have the pings. It's like, oh, I wonder how this is going to come off, and this, and I care less than I've ever cared. Yet it's a trip. It's a real trip. Because we as human beings, we do care what other people think of us. And
finding the difference between, for me, it's like I want to embody love. So the difference between loving people, loving humanity, and caring what they think, they feel like they can be connected at times, but they don't need to be connected at all. To be like, I'm going to show up fully as who I am, and you don't have to like me back. You don't have to agree with what I'm saying. I guess maybe there's a little bit of a perception that, like, if if I'm coming off a certain way, do I burn a bridge with people? Maybe that's a little bit of what's there too, that it's like, oh, if they can't receive my style, receive me as who I am, then I'm cutting off some ability to communicate. Like I have this conflict between wanting to reach people where they're at, and so then compromising who I am to reach them where they're at, versus fully standing in who I am and letting them be on their path. Does that make sense?
Oh, 100%.
Yeah. It's a
You
wild.
articulated that, how those two shadows of mediocrity and compromise.
Oh,
They're
yes, I did. Yeah.
They're connected.
Yeah.
See how it just comes through, because these are the streams of consciousness in which you inhabit. So it's like, and that's where I would compromise and fall into mediocrity. So that's how, and that's an example too of how the shadow patterns reinforce each other. It's like they're closed. So, for example, can I talk? Do you want me to talk into this?
Yeah, please. Sure.
Interesting enough.
We're following the flow.
We're following the flow. Getting back to the gene keys, there are 64 gene keys and 32 pairings. So, and what you've just spoken into, I can use that as a great example, is the 8th key and the 14th key, which sit in your radiance and your purpose. They're programming partners. So they're literally programmed to reinforce each other at the shadow, both for the personal, both for the human, and in the collective field. So everywhere we live in this collective field of these shadows, but then personally, that's the combination that you're dealing with. And what the shadows do, that by the way, they reinforce each other. So as you become aware of one shadow and raise the frequency of that, you raise it more into the gift, and you automatically raise the other. So they reinforce each other at the higher frequencies as well, not just the shadow. What's interesting about the shadow is these are like closed circuit loop patterns. So at the shadow, the shadows are like the mediocrity and the compromise. They're just going like this, and they're running the show if there's no awareness of them. Yet as your awareness penetrates them, it's like it circuit breaks them. It's like, oh, I see you. That's how compromise works in my reality. And you literally circuit break them. And when you circuit break, when you break a circuit, the energy that was used to reinforce the shadow and drive the human and the collective along, that gets broken, and the energy gets to be used in the high frequencies. Like that kinetic charge that was used to like keeping the shadow down and reinforced, that expresses itself out into the world. That's where the dynamic tension just gets to express itself, but it needs awareness to penetrate in order to do so.
And that's alchemy, right? I mean, that's part of that process.
Yes.
We landed that plane.
That's what transmutation is. That's what alchemy is. That's how we alchemize. That's a really good example of how we alchemize the shadow. It's through awareness. And then you effortlessly just spoke about, and that's where I would compromise, because you've been living these themes out your whole life. And you so effortlessly articulated how they both run, which I then reflected back to you to say, oh, see what you did there? You just described to me how that 8-14 combination works. And then
how beautiful.
And that's what I was talking more about the gene keys. If I didn't wow anyone with my explanation, I was like,
you just did.
Yeah, I just did. And if I didn't this time, well, you might want to tune someone else. Go and explore them and be wowed. But that's what pops open through a conversation, through the keys, or through connecting the dots of our own mystery and our own template. And that's why they're such a profound technology, because they, like, over and over again, something will pop like that, and it's like, oh, that is that. And then when we express ourselves, we don't know what we know until we know at times, or we speak something out and it just drops out of our mouth. It's like, oh, that was there. So it's an interesting, but it's so beautiful. Yeah,
it is. Okay. I have a random question for you, and I know, how are you doing on time?
I'm great. I'm cool. I'm
You're
loving this.
good?
Yeah.
Okay, me too. Thank you.
What else do you want to talk about, Jennifer Briggs?
I love that you use my full name, Daniel Regan.
I honestly though, and I think the listeners may agree, that some names are better together. Jennifer Briggs is one of those names.
Maybe I need to start going by Jennifer. Maybe this is a part of my I was Jenny in high school, and then I went to Jen when I wanted to be a big girl. And I don't know, maybe I need to move back to Jennifer. Jennifer has never been. Maybe this is the new thing, Jennifer Briggs.
I think Jennifer Briggs. There's a power in calling back your name, like invoking that name.
Yeah.
The name back. Because I was similar. I got to age 10 and I wanted to be Dan the man, until about 10 years ago, and I actually went through this process of, and people can call me Daniel. I don't mind.
Yeah.
Yet there was a real power to recalling my birth name back in and actually owning that, because I had, in some ways, in a subtle way, disowned that name, Daniel, and put it to the back burner to be Dan, and everything was Dan for 25 years. And then to call that back, even if it's, you don't have to make a whole thing of it, but it's just an interesting thing, the synchronicities and the reflections that show up.
I'm making a thing of it. I'm going to get a symbol for my name.
I'm going to get some
a hieroglyphic. I'm going to throw a party. It's going to be the Jennifer Briggs party.
It's going to be the Jennifer Briggs party. You can do that.
It's good.
Balloons done and everything. Going to get a cake. The whole shebang.
Why not? The whole shebang. I'm getting the whole shebang.
Yeah.
Okay, this is a random question. It doesn't matter where it came from, but talk to me about abundance. What does abundance mean to you?
Where did that come from?
I was writing this morning, and I was like, what should I ask? And the question was, what is abundance to you, and what does it feel like to live in abundance?
I'd say getting all of my needs met. What does living in abundance mean? No, I didn't articulate that properly. I've been going through, this is not a straight answer with me, it seems. I've been going through more recently, being grateful for what I actually do have and seeing the abundance around me, rather than abundance money, abundance means. Because generally, I would say, a lot of humans say, oh, give me more abundance. But I would say that that's connected to money. Yet I would say abundance for me is a really healthy, vibrant, alive body. Because everything starts with our bodies. And if I feel great in my body, if I'm eating the right foods and taking the right supplements and training and doing the right things, I will feel all the abundance that I need to feel. I'm fortunate enough to live in a reality where I do get most of my needs met. I don't fly business class everywhere yet. Give me more abundance. Give me more abundance. I can actually do that. I don't do that. See, I'd love that. That's a goal. There you go.
Speaking of goals,
goals that I banished before. So that's a goal. That would be my answer for now. What would you say? I'll ask you the same question, Jennifer.
You just keep saying my name.
So good.
I think that resonates with me, and I would probably add to it. I think I'm like in the middle of a lot of life transition. As you're familiar with, I'm moving. My oldest daughter is graduating. My job came to an end. There's a lot of unknown, and I am finding myself in more gratitude and joy than I have ever been in my entire life. Like, I fall asleep. I'm like witnessing myself having these thoughts and feelings where I fall asleep and then I catch myself just actually thinking like, oh, I'm so thankful. Oh, this feels so good. Like life is so good. Like I'm just having an abundance of love and like gratitude and joy. And that feels so fucking good. It just feels so good to feel good. And I've been in the dark. Like I've been through a shattering. I've been through some of those things. So maybe that's a piece of that.
Yeah.
I've also been, I grew up with like that religious mindset around money and resources, that to like distance yourself from it, and that this idea that it had power. And I just don't think it has power. And I don't have my quote unquote mind around money. But I've had these experiences of like, I feel like if there's anyone I can be safe to say this to, it's you. But like, what is oneness, right? And what is oneness with money? What is oneness with any resource that we have? And like, so I'm like, well, what does that feel like? If money doesn't have power, if it's infinite, like love is infinite, what does that look like? What is that? I don't know. So I don't really have I'm not attaching money to abundance, but I also don't want to exclude it.
Yes.
From it. Does that make sense?
Yeah, 100%.
Yeah.
I like that frame. And I would actually answer with the first part of your answer. In my reality too, as a reflection, it's when I'm feeling like that, like when I'm on the ball, when like working on certain projects or around certain people and active with things that I love to do, and go to bed looking forward to waking up the next day, even if that's, I can't wait to train the next day. Like it's like that thing, but then that's abundance for me, that texture of that, except it's hard to go to sleep when I'm like that. So I have to take
Same. My go-to has been Tylenol PM lately. I'm like, I don't know what's happening. It's hormonal. I don't know, but I'm not sleeping the best.
I just wish it was tomorrow already.
Right.
That's a great, I like that. I'll use that as my answer next time someone asks me. I don't think anyone's ever asked me that, which is why it caught me. It's like, oh, where did that come from? It's an interesting one. That's like, yeah, I like that.
Okay, good. It's kind of random.
It is random.
Is there anything else that's on your heart or mind that we haven't talked about?
I think resistance is, I just had a note next to it because I didn't get back onto it when we were on the thread. But when we were talking about the ease and the flow, going with the flow, and the tensionality that I've been training. I'm in Tulum right now, and there's this place called the Jungle Gym, right? And it's great because it's just got ropes. I love functional movement, so it's got ropes, and you lift these rocks with the rope, and like it's all like really like primal. My body loves that. That I've been playing around with in the last couple of weeks. Going every day, because normally I would train for a couple of hours and then have a day off, a couple of hours, But I've been noticing that I've been moving through the threshold of like I need a rest day, or those things that can happen from the mind. It's like and the justification of not training, and I do believe, because I see. Yeah, and I have like exhausted myself in my physical training before, so that I'm exploring. My current exploration is that fine line between what we tell ourselves is right for us and what our body actually wants. And what my body is, through my experience at the moment, what my body wants is to train every single day. I've had a day off. I had a day off yesterday, but it's like. There goes the flow. Day off. And if someone's listening to this, they won't understand. But
I hope that shows up in the recording. You know what I'm gonna do? I'm gonna make like a, what's it called? Like a blooper reel. And it's just gonna be, like, if you could get every one of those reactions to happen.
That's the fireworks.
Yeah.
But it's an interesting exploration, because a lot of the time it's just laziness or lethargy. I wouldn't say laziness. They're laziness, lethargy, but a threshold that my body wants to move through. And when I move through that, that's when I get the feeling of abundance. That's when I get the feeling I've finished a training session and I feel great. It's like jumping in a cold ocean or an ice bath. You're going to feel better every single time you get out of that. But it's just going through the...
That's your experience.
Really? Like after you get out?
I mean,
I
don't know. I guess I do. This is in my head, but I read a study about how women's bodies are different than men, and like the cold plunge thing is more advantageous for men than women.
Yeah.
It feels like, yeah, I got it. I feel like I conquered a hard thing, but in the meantime, my body's just like, ugh. It doesn't. Yeah. But I think your point I think it's really important for us as humans to not overlook the value of tuning into our body all the time. Like, because this may be a season in your life when you're breaking through a thing. And I know that there are times when I'm like, oh, I need that. And there are times when I'm pushed my body to the point of it breaking and injury. And I'm like, I wasn't listening to the fact that I did need rest, but that's where it's such a individual, like, your body knows, your intuition, like, you know that, like, ooh, there's a breakthrough on the other side of this. And to go into that, knowing that and follow that, would you call it like a craving? Does it feel like a craving to train right now, kind of?
Yeah, I do. I would call it that. And I've been through, and I have been through phases, like you say, it's like where my body doesn't need that. Mm-hmm. But I think when we get in certain headsets sometimes, and this is from experience as well, it's like sometimes the hard on ourselves patterns that we have, the hard on ourself pattern that we have can drive us into more of a harsh schedule or a routine that doesn't support us at all. Yeah. And especially during times of deep initiations or going through the deeper layers of our shadow or our process. You know, sometimes it's highly beneficial to move our energy and move our bodies, but a lot of the time as well, and it's up to the individual, the body just needs rest and it needs gentleness, because gentleness can be such a foreign phenomenon. And as a man, it's in my experience too, being a man, gentleness and softness have been foreign kind of energies that weren't a part of my earlier life at all. But that's what's required a lot of the time as well. And a mixture of both. But only the individual knows. Yeah. As we tune into our bodies more and give the minds a bit of a break.
It seems like too simple of a way to put, like, it's just smack a label on my life experience, but it really lately has been like, oh, this is what adventure is. Like, I don't know, like, if I could just like put a bow on it, it's like, I don't know where this trail is leading. I'm going to turn around the corner and see where it's going, like, yeah. I don't know what my body's going to need next month, but right now I'm like, oh, I want to lift heavy weights, or man, I really need yoga, feels really nourishing, or so just like following all these little things. And at least right now for me, I'm in this season of excitement, feeling like it is an adventure, like, ooh, what's around the corner,
Yeah.
And what's going to happen if for like you, like what's going to happen or what's going to unfold as a result of me leaning into this thing or pushing my body this way, or like reading this Mary Magdalene book that I'm like, oh my gosh, what's going to happen?
Yeah.
It feels like real adventure. And you, I mean, you're the person that I know right now in my life. I'm gonna say that I know you now.
Yeah. Well, it feels like that anyway.
Yeah, it does, doesn't it? Yeah.
Yeah.
I don't know if this will feel like a compliment or not to you. I mean it as a compliment, but like you're living an adventure.
Yeah.
Yeah, more than anyone else I know.
Yeah. It is that there's so much unknown in this adventure too. It's been a bit of an art form to come into more mastery of. Actually, I was talking to my daughter about this not long ago, about a week ago actually, and her perception of me and and kind of how I view myself and where life takes me as I surrender. It's like it's got this whole plan and over the years I've let go of my attachments, and let go of my need to control life, and life just takes me on these wild adventures, and it keeps on doing so. And the more I surrender, the more awesome it gets, and the more awesome people come in, like you just chiming into my inbox. Old friend, that's because that's how it feels. It's like, because you say, so you get to have these connections and these adventures, yet the level of the unknown and the mystery at times, personally for me, is a little bit challenging when there's nothing, like there's nothing at all. There's no plan. Like my retreat schedules come to an end, and now I've got my next real thing. There's some things that may be happening in Europe in the coming months, but nothing's like set. So there's nothing set until August, where I've got my next retreat kind of planned, or I've got my online commitments, stuff like that. But generally, my life opens up these portals of space, and in that space can be anything can emerge, like the sites that we talked about before, like the polarities of like, oh, the giving up pieces, like, oh, I didn't know that was still there, or all these bits I can explore before a more structured period. So because tomorrow, it's interesting that you say that, because change is just so embedded in my reality, and it's in my template as well. It's kind of locked in that there's always going to be this change, and it's my ability to flow with these changes. But having the flexibility to change our opinion as well and change our worldview is a healthy thing as well, I believe. Yet, it's an interesting phenomenon. There was another point anyway. And life can then change like that. So I'm talking to you from this hotel in Tulum today, and life can just, I might be somewhere completely different tomorrow. And that's what I love about the surrender experiment, or surrendering to this journey, and just being able to be moved around. Because even in that karmic relationships piece, if you think, I believe that there's big karmic relationships, and they're going to come into our reality at certain. So there's a person, there might be a man or a woman, whatever floats your boat, is circling around like this in the orbit, and then one day it's like that. But if you've got two people who are like this and controlling their environment, their reality, and in completely different places in the world, existence is going to have existence is going to have its way again. And if it's going to pull these people around to have a meeting, and it's not only karmic relationships, obviously, it is, but it doesn't have to be the intimate relationships. But there's things that existence wants us to experience, and if we're in the flow of that experience, and if we're doing our inner work and we're showing up and showing up to life and embracing the challenge that life throws ahead of us, it's going to be able to do that with so much more ease.
All right, I have the biggest existential question for you ever. We can end here. How's this sound? You said if existence we coming back to this idea of that there's a greater orchestration, that existence has a purpose, if I can put it in those terms. What's the purpose, or like what's our purpose for existence?
What's our purpose existing?
Yeah, maybe this is two questions. What's our purpose existing, and what's the greatest purpose? If existence has a purpose, what is it?
To evolve. There you go. That would be my answer to the big one. To the personal purpose, to be in our physical bodies, to be stable, centered, and set in our physical vehicles, and to bring all of the consciousness into these vehicles. That's what I would say our greatest purpose is, rather than something out there as people can go looking for purpose out there, yet I don't believe it's out there at all. I think our greatest purpose is to be, and to be comfortable, set, and stable in our physical bodies that takes work, because being in these physical bodies demands, like, if we want to be anchored and stable in our physicalities and our emotional bodies and our mental bodies, that takes work. And that's the ongoing work, and what shadow work can do for one who's willing to go there is create the space to be able to do that, to work through the layers of anxiety and numbness and shame, guilt and rejection that we all have. We all have these wounds. And if we come into contact with that and work through them and accept them and embrace them, our life can change and be a really beautiful yet gritty experience. But that's where it's at for me. I want to ask you the same. What's your too?
Thank you for asking me. Yeah, I would say the purpose that existence has is to evolve. I don't know to what end. I just think there's this, we see it in all of nature. When you think about personal alchemy and like transformation, it's transmuting to a higher resonance. There's something, I guess. So evolution. On the personal level, and this is just speaking like from my experience, I've distilled my existence on this earth. It seems really weird to say that, but to a couple of things. One, I think part of my purpose is, I'm going to say learning, but to me that is evolution. It's like I came here to learn something, right? And that is what everything we've talked about, this process of going into the dark, engaging with our shadows, transmuting, evolving, learning, growing. That's a piece of it. And then I think the other part for me is pleasure. Like, I came here to also just like be, to have joy, to experience like life like no other creature on this planet gets to experience. Or if there are other beings outside of this planet, like we get to have a human experience in these human bodies. And to me, a part of that is really, it's pleasure in all of the things.
Yeah. I like that. That's great.
Yeah. So it's twofold.
Yeah.
So that's why I'm here. Just like a little adventure, a big adventure, big trip.
Yeah. Big trip, Jennifer Briggs. It's you asked some very thought-provoking questions on this day. Good. I like it.
Thank you. Thank you for your time. I'm going to have to break this into at least 2 episodes. So we'll get you on the pod as soon as possible here.
Yeah, cool.
All right. Okay. Before we let you go, I want to share with people the program you have coming up. Can you talk a little bit about that and where they can find you?
Yes, you can find me at danregan.co. That's my website. You can find me at Instagram. I am Dan Regan. And we do have, as in my friend, work colleague, Annabelle Vizcarra, she'd be a good one for the podcast. She's a powerhouse, and she's also been in the Gene Keys transmission for over a decade, and is really into her shadow work, growth, all of the things. And we're actually running a program called the Deepening
Mm-hmm. Yep, I'll put it in the show notes.
experientialwisdomteachings.com, experientialwisdomteachings.com, the Deepening, and Pod Early Bird, and you'll get the early bird special to join us. So yeah, we'd love to get one who's resonating with me or Annabelle's work, along for the ride, because it's going to be really juicy.
We love juicy. We love juicy on the whole shebang.
Well, if you want the juice, that comes to the Deepening. It's the place where all the juice is. Yeah.
That's awesome. Daniel, thank you for your work. Thank you for your time. This has been like such a gift of a conversation.
Thank you, Jennifer Briggs.
Yeah.
I really enjoyed it. I hope people get a lot out of it. Thank you.
They will.